Grab your popcorn, grab a drink, grab your broom. Indeed, it is time for the Witches Movie Coven. Witches, talking about witches in movies. My name is Patti Negri. I am one of your hosts. Let me introduce you to our other four hosts. The wonderful Heather Greene, who did write the iconic book about witches in movies. Richard-Lael Lillard, fellow witch, all of us. Courtney Buckley, and sitting in for Jason Mankey. That is not Jason Mankey whatsoever. That is Chad Hatter.
Thank you.
Should I separate them? Should I put them together?
You can say it all together as all one word. Chad Hatter is totally fine.
Okay, or Chad Edward Lee Everett, Instagram at Chad Hatter.
Which is a mouthful.
Anyway, so we were not here last week. We thank you guys for coming back this week. And tonight we are talking about an older movie, a George Romero movie, Season of the Witch. I've been watching up until minutes when we came on here. But as usual, let's start with Heather, our expert on all things movies, to give us a fill-in, shall we?
Okay, well, I'm going to first preface this by saying this is absolutely one of my favorite witch films in American film history, and everyone needs to see this because it's so different and so important, and just a very it breakthrough in many ways when it comes to the representation of witches, and I'll get into that. But so this is an early 70s movie, and so historically, contextually, we'll just place it in time. This was made after the production code limitations were taken off. So what I like to say is in 1969, when the regulations were disbanded, all hell broke loose in Hollywood, and I love saying that because it's quite literal. After the 1969, we had the first one, Rosemary's Baby, and then it was so successful, just a string of occult movies, witch movies. So like I say, most of the witch movies were based on the practice of Satanism, evil, et cetera, repeat, and rinse and repeat again, all through the early 70s. Most of these movies were not as good as Rosemary's Baby, I will say that. Most of them are B movies, but sometimes there's just really nothing better than a B horror movie. I mean, that's just reality of it, you know. Even a C-level horror can be quite fun and laughable. But this movie is a low-budget film made by the director Romero, who's more famous for his zombie movies. You might have watched those, but this was previously made, and it was a low-budget film. It is one of the few witch films of the era that one uses witchcraft ritual that's actually from real witchcraft books. It also is one of the few very feminist films. It has a feminist thread that interprets witchcraft as a way for women who were stuck, abused, and otherwise oppressed to get out of it. So you see something very different in this film. And I'll stop there and we can start chatting about how much we all love this movie, right, guys?
Anybody want to
look at Courtney?
I'll tell you what I do love about this film. First of all, I want you to notice my 70s makeup. And I'm a Catholic witch, and I have to run down and get more ashes, as he says in the film. He's this abusive man who's abusive to his wife, and she comes home with the ashes on Ash Wednesday, and he says, "I got to get down to the church. I hope they didn't run out of ashes." So I, in honor of that, I made sure I have ashes on my forehead. But speaking of Rosemary's Baby, yes, that was 1969, and this I love because they make a lot of references. The neighbor witch, she says, "Oh well, whatever you do, if the chocolate pudding tastes chalky, don't eat it." And she says, "What? Oh, it's a Rosemary's Baby thing." And then of course, the other thing that I love too is that the fellow that she ends up by seducing with witchcraft. He always says, "Well, you're trying to seduce me, Mrs. Robinson," which of course is from The Graduate. So the movie buff in me went, "Ha!"
Did the witch buff in you do the same thing at all during some of the rituals?
Well, there were, yeah. I love the rituals as she's calling upon the winds. I went, okay, yes, I understand that. As she's calling upon the will, yes, I understand that too. The witch parts I really loved. There was a lot. The dream sequences were a little difficult to understand. The marijuana, I get it, but it was really hard to distinguish what was reality. But I do think, like you said, it is very important, this film. And I also, it is feminist. She was being an abused wife, and we are coming out of the age where that was not something that anyone really wanted to see on. People still don't want to see it on television, but it was not portrayed. And most things were sort of wanting to be a little bit like the Brady Bunch, and they wanted perky and happy, and the Partridge Family, and this showed her sort of, she was abused and she was trying to cope with it. And how does she cope with it? She turns to witchcraft.
I
So,
think
like, I'm gonna have
Courtney
to
should
give this
tell us
another
about the
chance.
movie that she watched. Because I think everyone at home needs to know what this poor child went through.
Yes, Courtney, go next.
Hold on. Now, I got on here and I was like, no, wands down. This was terrible because I had a traumatic experience with this. I feel now very guilty. Like, I should try to give this a third chance. I tried watching this movie twice. I fell asleep both times. When I sat down to watch it, I was like, oh, I'm definitely going to love this, because the scene in the beginning where they're like literally using like someone's $90 handheld camera to film like branches, like smacking her in the face, I was scream laughing. I thought, this is great. This is just the kind of movie I want. I saw the chocolate pudding part, whatever, but it all gets a little foggy, and then I fell asleep. And then I woke up right before we started the show to a movie that looked very similar. The people looked very similar. And then it was this horrible, triggering, like ridiculous movie. And I was like, why would they make me watch this? This is so horrible. So I was like mad, and I got on here and I was like, everyone's like, didn't you love it? And I was like, no. And then seconds before coming live, I realized that I had slept through the end of one movie and started another movie. And that movie, friends, was called The Witch Who Came from the Sea. So I woke up to this.
But I need everyone at home to understand, she's underselling the way that this was presented to the rest of us. Because she swept into the thing and was like, this movie had this horrific scene that I had to see, and blah, blah, blah. And everyone's like, I love this movie. I love this movie. And she had this look on her face of just not only perplexion, but also deep-seated concern for these people that she's choosing to associate with. And there was a solid...
And there was a mermaid, and she had.
I'll tell you. So this is. Yeah. I woke up and I'm like, they're like, you watched the wrong movie, and I'm like, no, I didn't, because the branches in the face, like, this is the thing. But then it gets to this point where this crazy lady has this mermaid tattoo, and she's trying to use a razor blade to shave it off. She like wakes up next to this guy called Long John or something like that in the bed, covered in blood, and he's like, oh my god, something's wrong. And she's like, what? It's just my own blood. Like, sorry, I'll get up and run to the laundromat if I'll get it off your sheets. But what she tried to do was razor off the mermaid tattoo, and I'm like, I wake up to this and I'm like, what is this? Like, they looked similar enough that like
she's describing this to the rest of us, and everyone is just like
what?
Trying to make it. It was a solid 5 minutes of really delicious confusion.
Yes. Yeah, and then there was a very graphic like flashback scene. So we're talking about flashbacks. I'm like, yeah, this was the right movie, because this horrific flashback. Right. And then she was being assaulted as a child by a grown man with a mermaid tattoo. And I was like, what did these people make me watch? I have to call somebody. I can't be on tonight. Like, I can't talk about this.
Well, let's give context to Courtney's confusion here. So The Witch That Came from the Sea is a 1976 schlock horror movie about witches. And there it is. And it made a few years later. And I just to point out that there's a ton of them. there are a ton, and they not just witch. I mean, I like to call it witch exploitation period of time, because a lot of the movies in the late 60s and 70s, early 70s were exploitation films, like black exploitation. There's different ones. They just went wild. Hollywood went wild.
Exploitation.
There is
I'm
I'm losing my earpiece right here. So basically Hollywood went nuts when the code was gone, when they didn't have to be censored anymore. Some of our best American movies were made during this time. If you think Godfather, even Jaws, which was groundbreaking in many ways, even if doesn't stand the test of time, but things like Godfather, Star Wars came out then. This was an amazing time for both music, for movies. The 70s was incredible. But oh gosh, my goodness, I'm sorry, I'm losing my earpiece. Anyway, so we had a lot of these crazy B-level films that were trying to capitalize on what happened with Rosemary's Baby, which was a brilliant movie, all in all, tight, perfect, and we should have a show on it and discuss it, just hands down. But you had Brotherhood of Satan, you had Black Noon, you had Simon King and the Witches, Touch of Satan. I'm just reading from the list here. Crowhaven Farms, which is actually not that bad. Blood Sabbath, Blood Orgy of the She-Devils, and that's the best title of all of them. So you just have and of course, poor Courtney wound up with The Witch Who Came from the Sea.
I'm traumatized.
I know how you did, though, because I was watching it on that, was it Tubi or Tubby?
That's where it was, yeah. Tubi,
and right under it said, if you like this, you're going to love A Witch from the Sea. So it probably just.
I will not. Yeah. I should have called the authorities, like the FBI. No, I did not love it. The fact
I want to take a moment. I want to take a moment just to look at that poster one more time, and just the way that it's painted and the color scheme, and she's underlit and her boobs are out and she's got hips for days. Like,
I'll tell you, her boobs were out for most of the time that I saw it too.
That's nice.
It was.
And that's actually very common in these movies. And I talked about that when we talked about Anna Biller's film, who was trying to replicate the styling of these movies. She was trying to get that sense of that 70s pulp kind of sensibility that these movies have. But she actually showed, when she showed the nude scenes, she had both men and women naked. It's a modern movie. There in these movies, it's all boobs. All boobs in every movie. The women are always, and especially the witches. The witches are usually either half naked on top or completely naked. It's just a feature. Sometimes completely naked. Men are never naked, but women are always naked in these movies. So I
really liked when they did have on clothes, though. I liked the clothes because I had just on the plane in from Australia today. I watched Almost Famous, which takes place in 1973, a bigger budget movie, with Kate Hudson, and I just loved all the clothing. And to me, we would need Chad's better expert on this, but I thought they did really good with those early 70s looks.
The 70s is a weird time for costuming because you're kind of like America was still sort of riding the wave of polyester. And so everything on camera has this kind of like almost like a cartoon made reel, just no texture, very flat. There was bronzer. Everyone was wearing bronzer and bright, garish eyeshadow and excellent, handlebar mustaches. And it's rare when you come across a film from this period where the costuming makes sense in context. Because a lot of times when you get costumes from any time period, including like the 90s, you can look at it, and if it's meant to be contemporary, you can tell what period it's from. So whenever they try to do fantasy, it sometimes works and sometimes doesn't. And I like to point to Star Trek, because Star Trek, it works, but it only works in context. But I was looking at pictures of some of the witches' looks from this movie, and I think you could wear some of those to a modern music festival and you'd be the hit. It would be just avant-garde enough to work. And I think that's kind of lovely.
That's because I'm a witch. I'm a Catholic and I'm afraid, but I'm a witch. Oh no, I'm a Catholic. No, I'm a witch.
The doe eyes make this.
Yeah.
I know it's
Richard
real.
Lael, I don't think you're taking this seriously. A woman was accosted with a mermaid tattoo, and I haven't actually seen the film, but
outrage!
That was not this movie, Chad Hatter.
Wait,
I'm
no,
sorry.
actually,
Sorry.
hold on. Here's why it's very easy to get these two confused in the, sleep, because there was also weird flashbacks in this movie, but the weird flashbacks in this movie were like that inverted color, and then it was of half men, like, and body parts, like men cut off at their torsos, and then body parts strewn about on like a raft in the ocean, which is why when I woke up I was like,
no, that's not this movie.
Not this
this
movie.
escalated very quickly.
So the flashbacks in the beginning are not really there. There's more like she's struggling with her life. She's her daughter, who's adult, doesn't like her. She's aging, so she's looking in the mirror at this person that's getting uglier and uglier in her perception because she's hated by her husband. So it's more like less flashback and more like her mental state, this state of confusion and sadness and just feeling like I'm worthless. And getting back to costumes, I think that's reflected in the costuming. When she goes from this housewife, her hair's pulled back, she has no makeup on, she doesn't have the Richard-Lael eyes going, she's totally bland. Her coloring is dull, and her costume's simple. And as she starts to practice witchcraft, as she engages with the young her daughter's boyfriend, I think he was, right?
Yeah.
And as she starts to engage and eventually goes and becomes initiated with the 5-hole kiss, let's just point that out. And then she goes through that, and then at the end, when you see her in the final scenes, her hair is as big as a 70s hair is going to get. She's got the makeup, she's got the colors, and she says, I'm a witch. And
it's funny because you can almost track. I just was going to say, you can almost track her transformation by just watching her collar, which starts up here, and then as the movie progresses, it begins to get lower and lower. And I love her eyeshadow, her silvery kind of like Gail Sondergaard eye makeup. It's lovely.
I really love the fact that she does get empowered, and she is lusty, even though it is after she's abused by her husband, and she lusts after her daughter's boyfriend. But her daughter's boyfriend isn't using him, so she might as well,
Exactly. I thought the only thing in the beginning, I liked the sex part. I liked all that. In the beginning, I thought, because it was a bit slow paced, they took too long to show how much of a bored housewife she is. But then into it, it just made me that much more feel her frustration. Had I not going, oh, we're starting in an hour, I probably wouldn't have minded that much going, get to the witchcraft, because it made me feel that frustration for her. And that's when I like a movie.
I also just love how, sorry.
I was going to say, Patty, I agree with you. When the first time I watched it, I was like, that first scene, I was like, did I miss something at the beginning? Like, I had to reply, go, what's going on here? I was so confused. So it took a little bit of time to kind of get into it. It is a B film. It had a very low budget. And it actually was marketed after he made it, which was, it was his passion to make. After he made it, it was marketed as a porn film, which it really is not at all. And they didn't know why. And it failed miserably. And I think part of it is the low budget. And part of it was that weirdness at the beginning. He was doing something different. And I agree with you. It took a minute to really go, wait a minute. Okay, this is pretty cool, actually. So some movies are like that.
And like Courtney, I watched it twice before falling asleep. And I watched maybe even 3 times before. When I had first seen it, I saw the first sequence and then I fell asleep. And then that when we didn't have a film, I said, "How about this film?" I had to go back, and then I watched it and I fell asleep. And then I watched it again and I fell asleep. So I just watched it like an hour ago, all the way through. I sat down and I watched it. I went, okay. By the end, I actually really like it.
Mm-hmm.
I just love all the things in it that are almost presented as warnings. Like, this is what your life could become, and you look at what she becomes versus what she was at the beginning, and it's like, okay, but that was way more palatable. That was way more fun than this nonsense. Like, yes, shoot the husband. He's in the way. Like,
And Patty, you had something you wanted to say?
Yeah. No, I'm just enthralled. Is that a double cigarette holder?
You know what? It is a double cigarette holder. I'm going to tell you, this is a replica of one that was used by Dustin Hoffman in Hook.
Yeah.
And these are very rare. They're very hard to come by. And I'm going to tell you, Chad Edward Lee Evatt built this one. And as a gift to me when I left Los Angeles, he gave this to me. So yes, it's a double cigarette holder. I thought because it's the 70s, they like a lot of cigarettes.
A lot of cigarettes.
Listen, I'm going to need to borrow that after what I watched accidentally.
I feel so bad for Courtney because, so here's the thing. I want everyone to know, full disclosure, I've been doing like surreptitial research so I can kind of keep up on the visuals and be able to actually, contribute something to this. I haven't seen the film because I was told I was doing this like 45 minutes ago and just didn't have time. But like, I may not be prepared, but Courtney is at least moderately prepared. And
I wasn't for that.
Well, I think going into watching the 1970s horror movies, these B films, you have to take them and be ready for them because most of them they're not very gory, but they're pretty bad and they're really funny and they're just, you get addicted to them. It's like eating sweet tarts or something. Oh my goodness, I gotta watch another one. I just need another. I want to watch another one. And I for the book that I wrote, I had to watch them all back to back. And I just wanted to see how bad it could get. And it really, actually, to be honest, the worst B horror film I saw was actually from the late 90s and early 90s. It was not from the 70s. The one thing that's really cool about the 70s, and if you are a practicing witch and you know your stuff, watch for it in these movies. Make it like an Easter egg hunt. Watch all the ones in my book. You get out the pages in my book, look through them and start watching them. And it's an Easter egg hunt because the oh, there you go. Good. List them off, Courtney. Sorry. So basically what happened was it was in the late 60s when modern witchcraft, modern Satanism, LaVey, all this stuff was coming into vogue. It was becoming popular. It was becoming popular in Hollywood. It was becoming more accessible in books. I think Gardner's books, I've talked about this before. Gardner's books first came to the US published in 1970. Buckland's books were first published in 1970. So you had this, the magazine, zines, all of this stuff, plus the counterculture was making it accessible. So you wind up with these writers having access to real material. Now, of course, the portrayal of witchcraft in these movies is not accurate. However, they use the stuff. That's why it's like an Easter egg. You see the stuff in this movie. Mark of the Witch, another really good one to watch. Not a positive reputation about witchcraft, but they call the goddess, they call the corners, et cetera, et cetera. And you'll see it over and over again. So from throughout the 70s, 68, 69, so through mid 70s, watch the B horror films and check off the real witchcraft you find in them. Buckland was actually an advisor on necromancy, the film Necromancy.
And I did like in this film, too, she says, well, witchcraft, it's not like you see in the movies. You can't use the power to turn off the light switch. I think is what it was. I may have misquoted that, but you can't twitch your nose and make it happen. Mm-hmm. And then she goes on to explain it's about intention. And you wanted it. And that's why it happened. You wanted it.
I want to piggyback on what Heather said, which is just, I really enjoy when the magic that's being presented is so hokey, but it's surrounded by real ephemera, because the last time we were here, we touched on the Wicked Witch of the West. And when you look at her castle set in her tower, it's filled with accurate ephemera. There's the 5-point star, chalices, mortar and pestle, herbs, incense. It's wonderful when the people who are making the environment do the research and make it as real as possible. And there's a really great, I know you said you didn't want to talk about bed knobs and broomsticks, but I do want to mention real quick that I love how the magic in that movie is very hokey, and yet there's a distinct lack of ephemera. She's got her big thing of like, poisoned dragon's liver in her jars of, pickled preserves and stuff like that. But it doesn't, other than her broomstick, it doesn't get too terribly hokey. It's weirdly grounded for something as kind of ridiculous and chanty as it gets. But what's really remarkable is Disney did the same. I mean, the Evil Queen also, when you see her, the way they animated her dungeon, she's got all the correct ephemera. It's marvelous. It's wonderful. It's absolutely wonderful. They rarely ever use it on camera, but it's wonderful.
Can I address one of the messages, or one of the things in the comments? Someone said they don't see how it could be porn film, and I mentioned that it was marketed as a porn film, and this is another contextual point for the 70s. It was the 70s when the porn industry really took off in terms of movies. The rating system came into play and made that possible, although there was films prior to that called nudies, and there was the first melding of the nudie film and witchcraft was in the 60s. There was a film called The Naked Witch, and it sort of started to come together. And that was because, again, of the 70s and this sort of hell breaking loose, this exploitation. So you wind up with witch films and occult films merging with the nudie, with that nudie sensibility or something. You have it sort of light. That's why you have a lot of boobies and other things like that, because the cult and this concept of it's not, I don't call it porn, but this concept that sort of light porn kind of melded together in a lot of these films, and you see it. It's all titillating. It's all very intriguing but scary at the same time. So you have that happening in these 70s horror films. They're not really porn, and I think that's why they marketed this one as, because it was a cult, because it was on edge, and why not mix it in with that? It's not a porn film, and that at all, and it never was meant to be. But the marketing people first marketed it as Hungry Wives. That was its original title, to make it feel like a porn film. And then they changed the name to Season of the Witch in the early 80s when they redid it, and it still failed. And that's unfortunate, because it really is a very important film and is a very well done. It's very different than most horror films. And I have to say
too, I adore Donovan, and I adore the song Season of the Witch. Mm-hmm. And it's featured in so many other things too, when even more contemporary things. When you think of Dark Shadows with Johnny Depp, they're going back to the 70s, and what do they play? Season of the Witch. Yeah. So I think the entire film and that particular song is incredibly important, not just to the witch community, but also in media. Mm-hmm. It really captures that 70s. It's that time right after they released the Hays Codes. I think it's brilliant.
And it's interesting.
I had a very different experience. The Witch That Came from the Sea had a lot of doing it. That could have been.
And Courtney, there were a lot of ones that went way further. There's the psych. I think it's 4D psych. Hold on, I have it in my book. It's called something like Psych 4D Psych, Sex Rituals of the Occult. And there's a lot more. There's a lot of films that it's a range. They go from like this one to far over closer to the porn, and then into porn. Actually, you see a lot of that in the 90s. Actually, more of it in the 90s than you do during this period of time. But you do, and The Witch Came from the Sea is one of those. It is way closer to that, which is why you were like, "What are we watching?"
Well, because the scene. No, but like there was a lot of like. I was like, oh, okay, like there's boobs, there's blood, there's whatever, there's doing it. But then there was like a flashback scene to childhood trauma that was played out on the screen. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, I'm not going to finish this. Like, I'm going to go on and yell at everybody for making me watch this. My clue should have been that it was 3 hours after I started. No, the people looked the same. And I just thought it had evolved.
3 hours later.
3 hours later. And I was like, this movie's kind of long. Like, I actually had a moment where I was like, Tubi must play a lot of commercials, like for it to still be going.
That's funny. I want to go back. I did too. The Season of the Witch. That just Right. That's the first time she was seen doing real witchcraft that she stepped into it. The song was perfect. And I think it just added to the whole thing, like you said, Richard-Lael.
There's also it's interesting that song also pops up in children's media because there's a movie called Paranorman, and the entire aesthetic of this town that the movie is set in is kind of stuck in the 70s. Like everyone's wearing, lots of blue, lots of orange, lots of burnt orange, lots of brown, trucker hats. Those puffy vests that were, all over the place. But there's a whole section where they use the song Season of the Witch because there's a thing within the plot of the movie. They have a festival called the Season of the Witch. And and they use that song beautifully. It's such a versatile little ditty.
There were a lot of movies at this time that are worth watching that are not the C movie that Courtney watched. So I definitely advise them. One of them is well, and here's the other thing that this is, most of the movies in this time, the witch movies, were more about towns that were infected with witchcraft, satanic witchcraft. It's that type of witchcraft. So you have like a Crowhaven farm and necromancy and stuff. It's like this young couple, innocent man wanders into a town, just like you see in what's in the other movie where the young couple winds up on the walking into the building and getting. No, not Rocky. Well, it's the same thing, right? There you go. Rocky Horror Picture Show is the same. It is the same thing. Young couple, encounters the occult and gets wrapped up in it. Anyway, this one is actually one of the first where you see this bored housewife. It's what I call a bored housewife trope, and it's really the first time you see it. Who walks into witchcraft, gets involved. And it empowers her. And that last scene to watch her with that smile on her face, this is not bad. She's not bad. She's happy. She's released now. And you'd really feel that. You really feel Jones like, okay, now it's on, now my life is going to take a meaning. It's going to be, so you get that. And you see that a little bit here and there. There's other movies later that take on that bored housewife scenario where we see there's one in the early 80s. It's going to escape my mind in a second. It'll come to me. There's a story that gets repeated about the bored housewives using witchcraft, and I'm going to find the name of it for you. It's in the early 80s. Give me a second. And it is. Go ahead.
No, I was just saying we can all show our Black Phillips while you are looking.
Oh, yeah. Witch's Brew.
Witch's Brew?
It's called Witch's Brew. And it's another one. And it's a repeat of a common story. Another movie was made in the 40s based on the same book. And it's about a bunch of bored housewives who then engage with witchcraft in the case of that movie, it's to help their husband's career, but we don't need to talk about that. In this case, it's to help her. So it's a very unusual movie. The Truth About Witchcraft Today, 1980 cover.
I have that book. And I have every Scott Cunningham book. I think so. Lined up across my shelf. That was one of my first in the 80s.
Well, the book used in this one is Paul Huston's. Do you have Mastering Witchcraft?
I don't know. I probably do.
Yeah, it is super old. It's like 69 or 70. That's the one she's using in the book. She's actually using his words in that. It's pretty cool.
It's pretty amazing. It is. I mean, is it one that you would watch more than once? Only if you fall asleep like Courtney and I did twice?
I might try it again.
I think you should. Courtney, I think you should definitely sit down and watch it when you're awake, because
that's the problem. I was awake and then I was not.
Have a cup of coffee.
Yeah.
Or a Red Bull or whatever
it might need to be an IV of Red Bull.
Get through the beginning and let it start to happen, and you'll see her transformation. It'll interest you.
The thing is this, like, I am a huge fan of the B horror. Like, I love the purposefully bad you know, which obviously these weren't purposefully bad, but looking back on them now, look purposefully bad. But like Velocipaster is one of my favorite movies because it's just so stupid, and because I think it's so funny when they take themselves so seriously. So watching this, the beginning sequence where it's cutting from the husband or whoever he was walking ahead of her, and then her face all cut up, and like someone's literally taking a branch and like slapping her with it. Like I was crying. I was like, this is gonna be the best movie. And then I was like zoned in and waiting and waiting. And then all of a sudden I woke up and it was like mermaid tattoo, blood. Like, and I was like,
you were out like 3 hours, I think.
Clearly, like I was halfway through the next movie. So, but I will ask this. Will someone please rewatch The Witch Who Came from the Sea?
I will.
So that you will be we can trauma bond over how horrible this was to wake up to.
I'm going to tell you that Witch Who Came from the Sea is not one that I watched for the book. It's in my book listed. I watched 99% of the movies listed in my book. There's a few that I didn't. This one I did not watch, and I'd have to go back to my notes in my back room to find out why I did not watch this one. And I have to tell you why, and I will tell you why, and I will give you the reason why I didn't watch, but I am happy to watch it. I will watch anything. So I will watch it and we can trauma bond.
I love this for us because I want you to see the flashbacks, which I was like, what is even happening right now? Like, I felt like you have to imagine coming from like, I fell asleep. I didn't think I was asleep that long. And I thought the movie was still on. So I thought this was halfway through the movie that I had started watching, and how it had escalated from these like the branches in the face to visions. She would go like this. She would be like, and then it would be like half dead, or not dead bodies, like cut up on a raft. And I was like, and then she's like clawing at her stomach to try to get the mermaid tattoo off. And there's blood, which is very clearly like red food coloring and water that she's just smearing around like this. And then I'm like, and then she wakes up on the bed, and he's like, the guy Long John is next to her and is like, oh my God, your hands, like wake up. And she's like, fine, I'll go to the laundromat. Like. What is happening? So I think I was too traumatized to realize in that moment that something was wrong.
Well, we'll take a vote. That's maybe everybody who's like, again, I want to appreciate everybody who's chiming in. Rusty and Robert and Tabitha and Lisa, you guys are chiming in. So you'd let us know if you guys want to suffer through the Sea Witch with us or not. If you guys want to, we will. If you don't, we won't.
Well, hold on, because there has to be a trigger warning, because there is this is where I turned it off. I was like, absolutely not. I'm going to yell at everybody for making me watch this. There is a scene where she flashes back, and there's trauma associated with the mermaid tattoo that she has because someone assaulted her as a child who had this tattoo, and it's not graphic, but they show it. So be aware of that.
Okay. Well,
I don't want to be the problem. I don't want to be the problem.
Well, hi, Matthew. Matthew just jumped in. And I want to go back to Robert just said they use real witchcraft references and even refer to a religion. One of the first words are, that, sex with goat things is a little overrated. So they said something like that.
Yeah, I have a quote. I have an actual quote I wanted to read that gets to that. I just found it, and it's my favorite quote from the movie. And they're driving to the first time they go meet the priestess. And they're in the car, and it's the same. I think it's the same conversation they have about the where she mentions not to eat the pudding if it's chalky. That conversation, and Shirley, the friend, says when they're talking about witchcraft, she says the religion offers further a retreat from the emotional women, repressed women, masculine women, and those suffering from personal disappointment and nervous maladjustment. And then she sighs and says, Christ, what other kind of women are there? No wonder the stuff's getting so damn popular. So it refers to it as a religion. It mentions how popular it's getting, how it's a saving grace, so to speak, for women who are suffering, which is really what witchcraft has been for centuries in many cases. And it is for many, not just women. Witchcraft and magic have been a saving grace for many oppressed peoples around the world, across the board. So it's a remarkable, it captures something remarkable and unusual than most witch films. That's why I get excited when we talk about it. I'd watch it again, but yes, it is slow.
It is slow at the beginning, but once you get into it, like Patty said earlier, once you get into it, once you get to the witch part, once you understand why it's so slow, is because her life is boring. She gets abused. She goes to church. She gets abused. Her daughter hates her. She goes to church. I mean, that's her life. And then when it comes to the magic, then she, of course, I'm going to spoil it. She kills the husband. Why not? Get rid of him. He didn't need to be there anyway. And it was said, well, she thought he was an intruder, so what else was she going to do?
But didn't she dream of that earlier on in the film too?
What was that?
Wasn't there a dream? Now I fell asleep and watched another movie. No, I didn't. In one of her many dream scenes, didn't she think somebody was breaking into their house? Somebody's breaking into their house, and it was her husband. Then she was really beating up her husband in bed.
Oh yeah. There was that scene. Mm-hmm.
I think that was.
The question I have is that, is this really a horror film? And it's not a porn film, although it was marketed as that. Is it really a horror film? For me, it's not, because for me, it's not a horror film. But the only reason it's categorized as that is because there's a murder and because there's witchcraft. But is it really a horror film?
It's not any. I agree with you. It's not a horror film. It's not The Exorcist, which is a 70s horror film. It's not Poltergeist, which is considered a horror film. So no, I don't think it's really a horror film from the 70s, but it is an impactful film.
Which film?
Yeah.
Can I just hop in with The Witch Who Came from the Sea is classified, I'm on the Wikipedia right now, as a, quote, video nasty by the United Kingdom Department of Public Prosecutions, and was considered prosecutable for violating obscenity laws, but the prosecution proved unsuccessful.
And I think that's the reason why I skipped it, because the films that were clearly crossing the line over into pornography, I did not watch unless I got accidentally tricked. And I didn't know it was.
I was tricked. It was witchcraft. I was tricked. I was bamboozled into watching this. And it was
you just fell asleep and woke up and just continued watching.
Someone put a spell on me to fall asleep and not realize that I was not watching the same movie because they looked kind of similar. I don't know. But,
I mean, it was the 70s. You've got 35 millimeter. You've got bronzy makeup. You've got blue eyeshadow. You've got big hair. I can see why you would think it would be the same film.
I have a question. I have a question regarding like women's. I want to say women's lib, but that's not the correct phrase in the slightest. What is the earliest movie you remember seeing exposed breasts in? Because we've established that it was a real popular thing to do in the 70s, right? And
the first one that I remember is 1927 Fritz Lang's Metropolis.
Okay, but does that count though? Because they're metallic, aren't they? She's made of metal.
No, when Robert Maria, she's transforming. You see them when she's a cabaret, when she's in her human form, like a human mask, and she's seducing all of the men. She's wearing it's translucent fabric, but you can see her bosoms. So 1920.
I may have seen an edited version of this.
So you want some really geeky movie response to that?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so basically, prior to 1934, there was no code. There was no restrictions on what. That's why you see. Well, that's a German film. So first of all, so the codes were very different in the early part of in the U.S. even. So you had a lot of stuff that was going on in mainstream film. There's a lot more risque stuff in early silent films than there was in the golden era. Not necessarily what we would see in the 70s, 80s, and certainly not in the 90s, but you would see some exposure. And the very first film that had a nude mainstream actress was 1916, and that was an Australian actress who came to the US, and I think it was called Daughter of the Gods. And then she did another one called Neptune's Daughter of the Gods and Neptune's Daughter, I think are the two names of them. I list them in my book, but I think those are the two names. And she did full full nude scenes. Now, she had long hair and some of her body was covered, but you would see them occasionally during the silent era. Of course, when the production code was established in 1934, that was the end of that. You did not see anything at all. It was completely, I mean, women couldn't even wear like short skirts, for example. I mean, it was very restrictive. People don't understand how censored Hollywood was from 1934 to 1968. It was extreme. And it isn't until 1968 when the code drops. Now, I'm talking about mainstream films, indie films, private films, art house films. That's something totally different. Nudies, like I said, really got popular in the 60s before the code dropped. So you have some of that. The Naked Witch is 1961, but it's not a mainstream film. By Larry Buchanan. That's that film. But in 1968, it is until the code drops in 1968 when you start to see all hell breaks loose. You have sexploitation, blaxploitation, witchploitation, exploitation. Everything is on the screen. Anything they couldn't put on the screen prior to 1968 was out there for everybody to see.
And I spoke about it earlier. One of my favorite exploitation films. It's not about witches, but it's The Gay Deceiver. I can't remember. I think it's 1970.
I knew it. I knew that was the one. I knew you were going to say that.
I love that film because, this is off topic, but they're trying to avoid being drafted. And so they get together and they are, oops, I just lost a ciggy. It's a good
What
thing
did you learn?
It's a good thing it's not lit. Anyway, and my favorite line is, "Oh, you're messing up my marigold. Oh, you're messing up my
Peonies.
My peonies.
Peonies.
You're messing up my peonies. They're not peonies. They're marigolds, you silly queen."
My
Well,
God, I think she's right. They are marigolds. Well, I may not know my flowers.
You can't say it. You can't say it.
Say it.
I may not know my flowers, but I know a witch when I see one, and that's not what it is. But we're family friendly.
Let's go back to talking about boobs now. So for me, it was The Lair of the White Worm, and I remember watching it as like a preteen, like this, it was late at night, it was AMC, it's horror, HBO, whatever I watched it on, and she comes out all white with her boobies out. I was like mortified that I was seeing this because I didn't think that was a thing that was allowed. I just want to say that.
I have. Go on.
No, I was just going to say, I wonder, not just when the boobs came out, when boobs went from being real breasts to being like Pamela Anderson breasts.
70s.
80s.
I have to tell you, even though it's such weird, like Barbarella and I mean, yeah, when the boobs become these sort of, it's very 70s. But on a naked woman, I really love to see. I love that 70s body. I think it's so weird and
well, it's like a Botticelli painting. It's still real looking. It's not. It doesn't look fabricated quite yet. It's the same with men's bodies. That's why, if I may be so bold, that's why classic porn there's always a market for it, because there's just something about being able to look at a body and see the defects and the things that modern that they try to get rid of, and that they try to sell us on what isn't attractive, but it's real, and that's what makes it so engaging and lovely and wonderful. It's just like a Botticelli painting.
I know a way to get rid of the defects is with a razor. If you get a tattoo,
you let it go. Then to the laundromat, Courtney.
Fine, I'll go to the laundromat. I'll wash the sheets.
I always wanted a 70s body, and so now I have two in the trunk of my car.
Yes, that was humorous.
The one thing about just to bring it back and watching these bodies and witchcraft, and I do a talk on this, is that there is a link in these movies between women's nudity and witchcraft. It's two things that we're not supposed to be on the screen, or not supposed to be on the screen, that then come onto the screen together. So you watch all these witch movies and these occult movies, and that's one of the reasons why the witches are usually half naked or completely naked. If you really enjoy watching witches walking around naked, Blood Sabbath is one that has it. A lot of these covens of witches, which are typically all women in a lot of these movies, the younger women are completely naked. And it's like you're seeing the priestess speaking, and she's probably half naked, and she's talking to men, in one case to a priest, I think in Blood Sabbath, and she's doing her thing, and she's controlling and doing, she's the evil character, and she calls her minions, and all these naked women come walking in. And I think it's Blood Sabbath where the naked women kill men. I think that's one of the things they do. They find a man and then kill him. I think that's Blood Sabbath. They all begin to run together after a while.
Yeah, they all begin to run together, and then they cut the tattoo off with a razor, and then Courtney goes to the laundromat.
That's 3 hours after you've watched all the others.
Listen, if it wasn't so traumatized, I like I said, I had that thought. I was like, I looked at what time it was, and I was like, wow, Tubi must play a lot of ads if I'm still on this. And then the trauma. So then I was like, I can't even think about what time it is. This is horrible.
I will say this though: if you want a movie from the 70s, I missed it. What was it? I'm so sorry.
It said The Witch Who Came from the Sea. Courtney watched the wrong movie.
That's the name of this episode.
Courtney watched the wrong movie. Yeah, okay, I see it now. You want a movie from the 70s that is like peak 70s, like atmospheric horror. Unfortunately, there isn't really a presence of witchcraft in it, but the remake of Nosferatu with Klaus Kinski, because Isabella Adjani as Mina in that movie is just so 70s and so stunning in every single scene that she's in. Like, just the way they've styled her makeup, her hair. And it's one of those movies where it's set in the 1800s, but there's like satellite dishes in the background of shots and like little phone, cables. It's little things like that. But as far as atmospheric and just like pure 70s, like gorgeous women, you can't beat it. It's amazing. It's so beautiful.
Wow. I love, there is a horror film that I love from the 70s that doesn't have anything to do with witches, but it does have to do with a possessed car. It's called The Car, and it's basically this car terrorizes this southwest town, and nobody knows who it is, but he runs people off the road and makes them fall into deep ravines, and it just runs along and it goes, meep, 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 meep. And it's just,
there sounds like Christine.
It's pre-Christine, but yes, it's sort of like that. Christine is a much better film. This one, you never get to see the villain. Is the car just this demon possessed car, or is there some person that's hiding inside of it who gets his jollies off by running people over in the Southwest?
So Richard-Lael, there's an episode of Futurama where they spoof that movie. Where so Bender becomes basically a werewolf, but he doesn't turn into a wolf, he turns into a car. And he like runs people down, and he does this thing where he'll like rear back on his tires at the moon, and it'll go, oh, honk, honk. And it's just,
I have to play that. I wonder if I can play that honk.
That is fun. That reminds me, nothing now, completely off subject, and then we're going to get back to wands up and wands down. One of the most affected, I think it was an 80s movie, but it wasn't a car movie, it was a truck movie. And I think Dennis Weaver was in it. And he was being terrorized
by the trucker. I think that was 70s. I think it was like 78.
Maybe that scared the pants off me. The tension, I still, you see big trucks go by, and it's like that just got me completely off topic. But
isn't there a more modern, like horrible horror movie called like The Tire or something like that, where like
Rubber.
Rubber. Okay.
Rubber.
It just like shoots off and like kills people. Oh my god. Can I go off subject for 1 second? Oh, that's scary.
I want that as a text alert.
That is funny. All right. Since we're getting close to the time, and I want everybody to be able to say what they have coming up, I'm going to see Robert Hicks, who's our regular participant. I'm going to see him in a few days in the Caribbean, where he's going on the Dark Water Cruise. But before we get to what everybody's doing, let's go back to the season of the witch. Wands up, wands down.
I feel like I can't do a wands anything because I watched the wrong movie.
I'm putting a wand up because I'm looking forward to watching it. So,
All right, I'll give one of that.
Everybody out there, hey, Scared and Alone, hey, Alyssa, hey, Cindy. Can't wait, Robert. I know, I can't wait too. They're 2 seconds behind us. So one's up, one's down. So we have a almost unanimous wiggly wands up for Seasons of the Witch, 1973, George Romero. And you guys want us to watch the scary mermaid movie? You let us know.
No, I just would like if anybody in the chat, like Heather, I appreciate that you're willing to trauma bond with me. I'm looking forward to it. If anyone in the chat decides to watch The Witch Who Came from the Sea and they need to, like, you know, trauma dump or like talk about it, my DMs are wide open for that conversation. So please send me a message and I will talk about it with you. Can I give a wands, like 800 wands down for The Witch Who Came from the Sea? But also, now that I've had some separation, I kind of feel like it's funny.
Ernie watched the wrong movie.
All right. So, okay, we have a couple more minutes left. So everybody want to say anything they have coming up or where people can find you? Let's start with our beautiful guest who we'd love to have on, Chad.
well, first I want to apologize for not being better prepared, but it really is Richard-Lael's fault. I will take full responsibility for it being his fault. And yeah, so thank you guys for having me once again. I hope I was able to actually contribute something rather than just babbling away, taking up space. You guys can find me on Instagram at Chad Hatter. That's really the only social media I have. I do have a TikTok, but I can't be bothered. I'm in my 30s. I don't really have anything huge coming up at the moment other than I did do costumes for a drag brunch that actually premieres this weekend in Orange County at Strut. It's themed on Wicked the Musical. And I did Elphaba's Act 2 gown with all of the kind of textures and everything in it for the fabulous drag queen Clairvoyant. So if you're near there, do go check that out. It's going to be quite lovely. I'll be there on the 26th. And other than just trying to get over the flu, that's really all I've got going on.
Okay. Courtney.
That's me. So my Valentine's Day tour, my anti-Valentine's Day tour is over. It was a great success. And that's it for me now. I just go back to the regular 9 to 5 and enjoying the wrong movie on Wednesdays, obviously. You can find me on all the various socials at the Themes. The QR code up here brings you to my Twitch, where I stream horror games and I have sound alerts set up. So if you want to come and scare me, please just don't show me any mermaid tattoos. And yeah, that's what I got. Or you can watch me at of course Scared and Alone as Ghostbait. Look at that. Look what
I got 1,000 postcards.
I love it.
1,000 postcards and 1,000 postcards of Witch's Movie Coven. I'm going to bring some on the cruise. So thank you. Yes, watch it. It's great. All right, Richard-Lael.
I am going to be at SatanCon in April. I'm really looking forward to that. It's going to be fun. It's in Boston, and maybe I'll be able to take Mr. Satan, and maybe I'll get to come and see Miss Courtney Buckley, and that would be lovely if I could. We'll see. I don't know. Maybe I won't get to take the car, but I'll still make a chance to come and see Miss Courtney Buckley in the flesh.
I'll find you.
I know you will. Otherwise, I'll be the different movie, and I'll have to go to the
Just go see through. Oh, thank you.
You can find me anywhere, thegentlemanpsychic.com, anywhere.
Perfect. Heather.
I am going to be in Minneapolis at PaginaCon. That is March 16th through the 18th, I believe. It's a couple weeks away. It's a great conference. Pagans, witches, all kinds of people up in the Minneapolis area. Super fun. I'll be there along with meeting with a lot of my wonderful witchy authors that I work with in my day job. And then several weeks later, I'll be in Delaware at Sacred Space and Between the Worlds, another witchy conference. That's really fun. That's another 3-day fun event to gather with like minds in the occult community. So I'll be doing that. And there I will be presenting on various topics, including books, writing, authorship, and witches in movies. Yay. And so that's on the books for the spring. And I did go to the Cauldron 2 in St. Augustine, got to see the trees, the love trees, and the haunted tiles, and felt some spirits because it's the oldest city in the US and lots of haunted space. is there. It's going to be a really good fun place maybe one day. You can find me at heathergreene.net and what I'm doing if anything pops up. So you can always check me there and see me on Twitter and Facebook and the other socials.
Okay, thank you. So you guys like them, follow them, like me, follow me. It just makes a difference. I don't know why. I am Patti Negri. You can get to all my right socials at pattinegri.com. I'm verified everywhere now. It is Patti.Negri on Instagram. Anything else is a fake. It's Patti Negri Psychic Medium on Facebook. But you can get there from there. You can get my book, Old World Magic for the Modern World. You can listen to my regular podcast, of which these folks are all on. Chad, we have to get you on too. The Witching Hour, which drops every Monday. Same producers, Pat and Christine. Rob, sorry. I'm leaving for the Darkwater Cruise in 2 days, and I will see, I know Robert Hicks is coming on it, and Wraith Chasers, and my partner in Paraflix, Natalie. And then I will get back in time to do the Parapod Film Festival in Santa Clarita, back home basically, and then I'm just on the road. So like us, follow us, go to our websites, because I've got 20 things I can't remember that they're on my list. If you want to come hang out with us, we like it.
We do.
And get your
Can we say a happy belated birthday to our producer Rob?
Yes,
his birthday
happy
was last
birthday,
week.
Rob.
Happy birthday!
Happy birthday, Rob. Happy birthday. All right, we're got a minute over. That's okay, because we have one more thing to do that witches always have to do, that and have Black Phillip. 1, 2, 3. That's the Movie Coven. Tell your friends. Join us.